I remember the day clearly. The day my world was turned upside down. It was April 6th, 1917, nearly 3 years after the start of the Great War, and President Wilson declared that the U.S. would be joining its allies Britain, France, and Russia to fight in the war. It was the war to end all wars, a giant step in making the world safe for democracy. At first, we were all so excited to be drafted. Excited to be sent overseas. Excited to experience a new place. Excited to bring honor to our nation. We were all so eager. That is, until we got there. As an eager young lad, having reached the ripe age of 17, I was drafted into the United States Army. I left home in July of 1917, ready to take on the world. But when I arrived at the training camp, I soon realized it wouldn't be that easy. My drill sergeant put me and the other recruits through a series of physical, mental, and weapon proficiency exercises. I spent every waking hour training. I had to learn all the basic drill orders and command structures for the Army and build my strength and agility. I even remember one day having to run with my weapon in hand for miles on end. It was the hardest thing I'd ever had to do up to that point. But as trainees, we persevered for our great nation. Soon, the brightest and strongest among us were selected and sent off to the Officer Candidate School to become commissioned officers in the Army. Unfortunately, I was not among those select few. However, I joined the ranks along with others as enlisted men sent off to fight in the front lines in France.
Death is my companion. I'd rather go. There are rats on the walls and there's lice.
This idealized vision of mine soon turned into a horrific nightmare. The Western Front, which I thought was full of courage and glory, was in reality a desolate landscape of death and suffering. The worst part was the trenches. I don't even want to remember those. They made me wish that I were on an open battlefield, being bombarded by bullets and bombs. Instead, death came slowly. On paper, trenches seemed like a great idea. Fortifications dug into the ground for machine guns and artillery. But nobody told us it was the conditions that we would be living in. We had to contend with an invisible enemy now. Viruses, bacteria, filth, vermin, and even close quarters proved to be deadly and claimed more of our lives than bullets and explosions ever could. Diseases like dysentery, typhus, cholera, gangrene, and trench fever struck us down one by one and spread easily in the moist, filthy climate of the trenches. I had to watch helpless as my brothers dropped lifeless around me, some going mad and succumbing to the terrors of war. Every day, I wondered whether it would be my last, but I was one of the lucky ones who survived the terrible conditions of the trenches. The war was over by November of 1918, but not without heavy losses to both sides. Over 9 million men had lost their lives in this unnecessary battle. Millions had died in the trenches, charging across the barren expanse towards their deaths, or otherwise suffering from mustard gas attacks, starvation, and disease. Some lived, but they lost themselves in the war. They were a victim to the condition that we coined shell-shocked, a condition that left shoulders empty and void of any soul. I try to forget the empty gazes in my fellow soldiers' eyes as they submit to the pressures of war. Our suffering was not eased by the comfort of home, however. We were isolated from day-to-day society by this horrible experience. No longer were we able to maintain normal daily contacts with our fellow neighbors. Some of my friends in this era were even seen wandering the streets with no purpose, muttering to themselves, truly lost in this generation. We had gone off to Europe to fight for the safety of our country, but had sacrificed everything: our youth, our sanity, and for most, our lives. We were lost in this great war. It was the war to end all wars, and we could only hope that by sacrificing so much, this would never happen again.